Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Dalton Gentry, and we are back for another day of Litmas. And today on Litmas, we have a pretty good prompt. It's something we do quite often on Strip Cover Lit. We make a point to do with pretty much everything that we read, because we think it's an important thing to do. And you may notice that it is slightly more festive in here today, because I actually decorated for Christmas, which took way longer than it ever should have, but whatever. Megan helped, and she is looking furious right now because I didn't mention her. Thank you, dear. But anyway, today's prompt on Strip Cover Lit is Quote of the Year. So basically, any quote that we came across in our reading for this year that we thought was good enough to have mention of being our Quote of the Year. So, book that I read earlier in this year that I really enjoyed, I thought was absolutely wonderful, comes from Ernest Hemingway, and this is A Movable Feast. And I'm really hoping what we could do is maybe next year we can do a little more work on A Movable Feast. But I did read this in my spare time this year, and I absolutely love it. It is just a gorgeous book. And my quote actually comes from page 147 of this copy. And this is Hemingway speaking about Scott Fitzgerald when he met him for the first time. His talent was as natural as the pattern that was made by the dust on a butterfly's wings. At one time he understood it no more than the butterfly did, and he did not know when it was brushed or marred. Later he became conscious of his damaged wings, and of their construction, and he learned to think and could not fly any more because the love of flight was gone, and he could only remember when it had been effortless. That is possibly one of the most gorgeous quotes that I've ever come across in a reading. I absolutely love it, despite the fact that, you know, maybe I have a natural draw towards Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway. It really is a wonderful quote, and it says a lot about the man. Hemingway goes on in the next chapter to talk about his first experience with Scott Fitzgerald, and it culminates in his first experience with Scott Fitzgerald's books, where he realizes towards the end that Scott has a gift. Scott was an amazing writer. From the end, if I could here, if he could write a book as fine as The Great Gatsby, I was sure that he could write one even better. And Hemingway goes on to speak later in the novel about how absolutely wonderful Scott's writing was, and how Hemingway is very envious of that. And I would assume at that point Hemingway started to emulate the novel writing. At this point in time, he was just a short story writer, and unfortunately Hemingway just not as good as novels as Scott was, and of course Scott, as we've talked before, not as good as short stories as Hemingway was. But I think that quote is really wonderful, because not only does it just capture Scott Fitzgerald, which is a very tragic story, it really captures Hemingway's relationship with Fitzgerald. It's something that they were close, obviously, good friends, and something that Zelda was not super crazy about. My understanding is Zelda never really liked Hemingway, never liked having him around, but Hemingway saw something in Fitzgerald, and he saw something that a lot of people saw eventually, but it took quite a bit of time, especially with The Great Gatsby. I know its initial run didn't do that great. But Hemingway not only saw that, but he seemed to identify with Scott as the man, because Scott had a lot of issues, drank a lot, which eventually led to his demise, and Scott was able to do something quite beautiful with writing. And it came very naturally to him, which is a rare gift, absolutely rare. And it did seem that when Scott became aware of the gift that he had, and he started to try to produce more, and things fell apart with Zelda, that's when his life really started, taking a turn for the worst, and he was never quite able to reproduce that natural beauty that he had when he first wrote The Great Gatsby. That is why this quote is absolutely my quote of the year, possibly one of the best quotes that I've ever come across. Again, from A Movable Feast, Ernest Hemingway. And if I may, one more. His talent was as natural as the pattern that was made by the dust on a butterfly's wings. At one time he understood it no more than the butterfly did, and he did not know when it was brushed or marred. Later he became conscious of his damaged wings, and their construction, and he learned to think and could not fly anymore because the love of flight was gone, and he could only remember when it had been effortless. If anyone can ever say something like that about you as a writer, you've made it. You've made it big time. Anyway, this is Strip Cover Lit, this is Litmas. We will be back continuing through Litmas, culminating with a huge video that we're really excited for on Christmas Day. Something very different, something very awesome, so we hope you're going to join us for that ride. And if you haven't been making your Litmas videos, there is still time to join in the festivities. Just make sure you get those videos up as soon as you can. Join us. We're only halfway through at this point in time. We're going to have a lot more great prompts coming. Down below, I will leave the link to our announcement video where you'll be able to see the prompts and hopefully join us. We do enjoy this, something we're trying to do every year. If you like this kind of thing, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Give this video a like as well, simply because it is Litmas. And if you would like to help us create more great content like this here on Strip Cover Lit, there's a link, as always, to our Patreon to be found in the description below.